Welcome to Money Talk with Tiff, a podcast where we discuss everything money from tips and tricks to current events. Follow me on my journey to become debt-free and meet other cool people along the way. I am your host, Tiffany Grant. Now let's talk money. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast. Today I have Laura Gariepy. She is the owner of Everyday by the Lake LLC, a freelance written content creation company that helps busy business owners stay top of mind with their target audience. I personally have met Laura at FinCon back in 2019, I believe. Gosh, it feels so long ago, but she's a really cool person. And it's funny because we actually met, and I'm doing air quotes here, on Twitter. And then we had the opportunity to meet in person. But she is an awesome, phenomenal person. She's also a business coach to new and aspiring freelancers and runs an online resource hub for them called Before You Go Freelance. In addition, she helps other writers get clear on their message, plan their content, and produce compelling written works. Hey, how are you, Laura?
I'm doing amazing, Tiff. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and for having me on the show.
Oh, absolutely. When you reached out, I was like, yeah, you can definitely come on the show. I love you so much. We spent, a little bit of time together during FinCon, and it was awesome to just kind of meet people in person, put a face to the name, that type of thing.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we interact with so many people online that it's always a great thing when you can bring them into your real life world.
Exactly. So let's get right into it. You are, I look up to you as like a freelance writing golden goddess. And I want to get all the juice on how this works. Because like we were saying before I popped on the mic, we were saying that, when I was at FinCon and hearing all the freelance writers, there's I make $10,000 a month doing freelance writing, or, $5,000 a month or what have you. And I'm like, really? Just for writing?
Yeah, it's kind of incredible. I mean, I know some folks that, bring in $20,000, $30,000 a month writing, and it's just wild to me. I mean, they're machines and they work, quite a lot of hours. So I'm not sure I'll ever achieve that level, but you can definitely bring in a really nice salary just by writing.
Nice. And that's what I tell people all the time. And, the audience probably heard it 1,000 times on this podcast, but it doesn't matter what you enjoy doing. Somebody's going to pay for it.
Yes, ma'am. You just have to find that market.
Exactly. Now, what really blew my mind, just thinking about the freelance writing space, is that, all of the popular websites that we frequent, most of them are freelance writers, not staff writers, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, some of the really big sites may have started off with staff writers, and then I feel like over time, as maybe the company changes hands or a new business model takes effect, they actually transition into using freelance writers. And then some major websites actually use a combination of the two. So it's kind of interesting as you navigate and work with different clients to find out exactly how things operate behind the scenes.
Gotcha. Now, if somebody loves to write like you do, what's the first step? How do they get into this business?
Well, if you've never been published before, because some journalists actually transition into content writing, either because they get burnt out on reporting or, their job dried up because unfortunately newspapers are downsizing, then you really have to just start by getting published somehow. And that's through your own website or blog. So I definitely advocate brand new writers to start a blog about a specific topic that they're really interested in and knowledgeable about, so that they can construct multiple articles to demonstrate both their writing abilities and their expertise in the subject matter. And as they're cultivating that initial body of work, they should go about broadening their network. So that should include other freelance writers to basically commiserate with and get guidance from, and other bloggers who can also basically show you the ropes of online writing, and then also potential clients, because even though you may not be ready at that moment to start making money, you will be soon. And then once you have those initial blog posts under your belt and you start networking with people in the online business community, you can reach out to some of those contacts and try to do a guest post for another website. Now, these opportunities are usually unpaid, but it gives you the opportunity to add a piece of your writing to someone else's digital space, which then gives you basically the bragging rights to say that you've been published elsewhere other than your own website. And from there, you can start to pursue some entry-level gigs, and over time that spirals into a full-time living. So there's definitely a process to go through, which takes some time and some effort, but if you stick with it, it can really pay off.
Awesome. Awesome. And it's funny that you say that, because that's similar to the steps that I was taking without even knowing that I was taking them. So when I started Money Talk with Tiff as a blog, it was just to chronicle my journey to be debt free by 30, never monetized it at all for like the first, couple of years or so. And then I went to FinCon, and then I was like, oh, so you mean to tell me I can get paid to do this? And so then I, interfaced with some of the brands. And when I got home, I actually had my first freelance writing gig with a company. And I was like, well, that was easy because I didn't know that, I thought that I would have to do all the editing and all that stuff. But really, I just wrote a really, really simple piece. And then, they sent it to an editor, then they sent it back, then they sent it to the editor. It was like a back and forth. And then finally it was done. And I was like, that took me no time at all. So I feel like it's just something that a lot of people don't realize is out there as a career opportunity. And so, I'm so glad that I came across you and FinCon and all of that stuff, because it definitely opened my eyes. And hopefully that's what we can accomplish with this podcast right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, having the opportunity to speak with other online entrepreneurs is always eye-opening, because there's always ways to make money that never occurred to you before. And honestly, when I quit my job in 2018, I wasn't even sure what I was going to do. And freelance writing just kind of jumped up and bit me, and I ran with it. And so, just becoming aware of that as an avenue to make real money, it was one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Awesome. Awesome. So give us some insight into how the process goes. Okay. So let's say, for instance, somebody's like, oh yeah, I love writing. And then they start the blog. Now, once they start the blog, and let's say they get their first contract, first freelance writing gig, how does that process go? Do they need to pitch something, or once they pitch, how does it all work? I have so many questions.
Well, it really does depend on the client. So, I have some clients that are like, oh, here, I have this entire content calendar and I just want you to work on it from start to finish. Then I have other clients that want to collaborate on a month-to-month basis to generate topic ideas for their site. And then others still are like, no, I want you to come up with all of the ideas, because that's why I hired you. I don't have time to think about content. And so it can really vary. And on the one hand, it's frustrating because I don't have any black and white insight to provide to people. It's not always going to go one way. But on the other hand, it's extremely interesting. And you get to learn a lot very quickly just by working with different clients who have different needs and different ways of doing things. And so kind of the bottom line is it depends. It always depends.
Gotcha. Now, when it comes to your company, do you do different kinds of topics, or do you stick around one topic or, a category?
So I started off in personal finance because I too started a blog about my money journey But that branched out. I have a background in human resources, so I do a lot in the career space. I also write about small business and entrepreneurship, since I'm a freelance coach and a small business owner. But even beyond that, I've taken one-offs like a pest control company, a behavioral assessment company, an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and just some other things that don't necessarily fit into my main three categories. And I really love doing that because it gives me the opportunity to research new things, learn new things, not get so bored with sticking, writing the same thing over and over again. And it gives me the chance to segue and break into new niches. So it's like now I can apply to write for medical websites because I've written for the ear, nose, and throat doctor. And so that kind of gives me a leg up on somebody that doesn't have that specific experience.
Gotcha. That's quite interesting. So, when you are, writing and things, do you always have to research? I'm just thinking about the people that do not like researching.
Well, I suppose once I've written about a topic several times, and that's come up, quite a bit, having been in the personal finance space for a while, it doesn't require a ton of research. But if you're unfamiliar with a topic, especially if it's technical in nature, most of the time you will have to do at least some research, either by reading things that have been written before through reputable websites or conducting interviews. You'll need to get that intel to make sure that what you're writing is accurate and current and up to date.
Absolutely. So I know everybody wants to know, like, if I really enjoy writing, I don't have the capacity to do a whole book. So I want to get into freelance writing. Is it going to be worth my time? Like, is the money good? Or, is it like struggle bus, like a typical artist for a little while until, you kind of catch on? What are your thoughts around that?
I mean, I will say there's a ramp up period. Everyone's journey is going to look a bit different. But for me, 3 years ago, when I got started, I was making like $50 an article, which, is pretty low considering the effort that I had to put in to create it. But now, all this time later, I have clients that pay me $500 an article. And so it's really up to you as a business owner, because that's what you are as a freelance writer, or any freelancer, to go out and try to acquire new and better business on an ongoing basis. That way you can over time retire some of those lower paying clients in favor of those that more adequately compensate you for your time and effort.
Okay, and I have another question. So, have you heard of like freelance writers kind of like outsourcing, maybe like the SEO aspect or maybe the research aspect of the written piece?
Yeah, I know some freelance writers have virtual assistants that can help with those types of tasks, especially the research piece and then maybe some proofreading. I personally don't really do that at this stage. I'm not totally against it. But I think the key thing is just to be mindful and maintain control over the process, even if you do subcontract out part of the work, because at the end of the day, you're turning in the piece and you want to make sure that it's a quality product.
Right. Because I mean, ultimately, it's going to reflect you, right? They're not going to know about the back end stuff that happened. They're just going to be like, oh, this is Laura's piece. Let's see if it's good or not.
Exactly. So even if you have someone help you, you need to make sure that whatever they're doing is up to your standards and the standards of the client.
Right. And I feel like that is the difficult part about being an entrepreneur and, originally doing everything yourself. When you do try to hire help, and I just had this happen to me, it doesn't quite, it doesn't quite work out how you think it's going to work out, or you have to do a lot of babysitting, or you're like, oh, if I would have did it, it would have been like this, that type of thing. So, like Laura said, just be aware that, whatever you put out, and it doesn't matter if you're doing freelance writing, selling hot dogs on the street, whatever. it's going to be a reflection of you. So like when you're thinking about your suppliers, and so like, let's say you're getting into the freelance space and you want to hire a researcher, that is now one of your suppliers. You have to make sure that it's quality work, or your business is going to be affected. They're not going to be affected. They're just going to have another client and another client, that type of thing, until people catch on. But it's very, very, very important that as entrepreneurs, especially if you're currently doing everything solo, when you do start to hire help, that they are doing it to the best of their ability and they're putting out quality work. I'm so glad you said that.
I mean, 100%. I totally agree with you. And I think you made a great point about the hand holding. I think that, should be an expectation of any entrepreneur. Just kind of throwing back to my HR days when we'd bring new people into the company, they need proper onboarding. They need to know how they need to do things, what your expectations are. And so you'll have to invest the time up front to make sure they have all of that knowledge and guidance, because without it, you can't really expect them to do the work you want them to do, because they don't really understand what's expected of them.
Exactly. And honestly, and this is a moment of transparency, I feel that's where I dropped the ball. I don't feel like I trained the person well enough. So I can't really blame them. You know what I mean? I was actually blaming myself. I was like, I tried to bring somebody on at a period where I was way too busy to even give them the necessary training that they needed. And so I can't be upset if they deleted an email that I really needed because they didn't know, right. And so it's like, I can't even be mad at that. But anyway, so let's switch gears a little bit, because, you have Every Day by the Lake and everything. And that's mainly what I know you from. So with your personal finance blog, do you still write on that, or do you mainly focus on content for clients now?
So admittedly, I haven't updated the Every Day by the Lake website for a while. That was my original blog. Right now, basically, it just stands as a way to advertise my writing services. I do a lot of writing for clients, obviously, but in 2020, I started a brand new website called Before You Go Freelance, to offer resources to new and aspiring freelancers, to give them some guidance. And so there's a blog there and a podcast there. And while I don't update the blog there as often as I should, because as you know, Tiff, it's incredibly time consuming to create a solid blog post. Those articles are definitely much more current than what's on my old site.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. It's like people really don't understand how much goes into maintaining a blog, maintaining a podcast, maintaining all your social media, all that stuff around, what you're blogging about, and to keep your audience engaged. It's a whole, it really requires a whole team, but a lot of us do it by ourselves.
Yes. And with life and, having to focus on the immediate income generating opportunities, sometimes it's easy to drop the ball on those things that don't necessarily have an instant yield. So I'll be the first one to admit that, I'll miss weeks for podcast episodes, and I'll leave my blog stale for a couple months at a time. So, not proud of it, but it basically happens when you're trying to do everything yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My podcast audience knows. I was going good once a week, releasing them every Thursday. And then, you get too busy. And then next thing you know, you look up and it's a whole month has passed and there's no podcast episode. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, guys.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I mean, the only thing that makes me feel better is that, I'm still building this body of work that will exist even if I don't release it on the original schedule I intended to. So at least you're still contributing, to the empire that you're building over time.
Absolutely. Now, I do remember I did do a piece for you before, and I just want to thank you publicly on this podcast because that was actually, I want to say, my first piece that I wrote for someone else. And it was part of Laura's Financially Dumb, Personally Brilliant series, which I love. And I wrote an article about income is replaceable, health is not. So when I was quitting corporate and, I literally had an asthma attack when I was getting ready for work, like collapsed in the bathroom floor. And I was just like, this is not it. This is not it. Because I was like, if I was to die right here, right now, nobody would care. I would just be replaced by tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? And so I just want to thank you so much. And for the audience, I will have a link to that article as well in the show notes. So that way you can check it out because she does really awesome. Now, granted, this was like a few years ago when I did this, but there's a lot of good content on her website that still applies to this day. So I just wanted to thank you and just shout that out.
Well, I thank you for writing the piece. And you took me back bringing that up. I'm like, oh yeah, I had that series, and now I remember your story. And it was a great article. So I definitely encourage anyone listening to go check that out.
Thank you so much, Laura, for all of your insight into freelance writing. Y'all, I'm telling you, it is a great way if you love writing. Let's say you already have a blog or you're in the process of writing a book or whatever. It's a great way to just generate some income, some quick income. I don't really freelance as often as I would like to, but when I did, I was like, oh, this was easy money, So definitely look into it. And Laura is a great resource. And with that being said, Laura, how can people find you if they're interested in getting into freelance writing or your coaching services?
Well, yes, and thank you for giving the opportunity for me to kind of shout myself out a little bit. So my main website for freelancing resources is beforeyougofreelance.com. And I'm happy to chat with anybody via email. So you can always just shoot me a note at laura@everydaybythelake.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Laura. And I will have all of Laura's links in the show notes for you all to digest at your leisure. But thank you so much for coming on. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope you do too.
Thank you for listening to the Money Talk with Tiff podcast. For free resources and materials, head over to moneytalkwitht.com. And while you're there, why not sign up for our newsletter so you'll never miss an episode? Talk to you soon.